Welcome to Digital Trust Talks, the show where we'll explore the trends, challenges, and breakthroughs shaping the future of digital trust. I'm Vladimir Soukharev, Chief Cryptographic Officer at Keyfactor, here with a very special guest, Dr. Michele Mosca, co-founder, president, and CEO of evolutionQ, and one of the world's leading voices on quantum computing and cybersecurity. And actually, back in years when I was defending my Ph.D., Dr. Mosca was on the defense committee as well. Today, we're tackling a question that's on a lot of minds, but perhaps not yet on enough roadmaps. Are we truly ready for the quantum future? And we're taking a cybersecurity perspective on this. Our latest Digital Trust Digest Quantum Readiness Edition, developed in partnership with Wakefield Research, surveyed 450 cybersecurity professionals worldwide. The findings paint a clear and concerning picture. Nearly half of the organizations, about 48% to be more exact, are not prepared to confront the urgent challenges posed by quantum computing, which will render the public key cryptography businesses rely on today obsolete. We're going to unpack what all of this means, why it matters now, and how to move from waiting to being ready. And this kind of raises our first question. Dr. Mosca, with nearly half of the organizations acknowledging they're not prepared and many waiting for external pressure, how are companies today defining their quantum readiness? And what are some of the biggest misconceptions you're seeing in the industry?
Yeah, I guess there's two aspects to, quantum readiness or readiness for any new, you know, exciting capability. One is how do I leverage it to advance my business, the positive aspects, applications. And then there's how do I defend against, adversaries who have these capabilities. And of course, they go together because if you're not appropriately ready to deal with the attacks enabled by quantum computing, you're not going to be able to really leverage the positive capabilities for many reasons. So I think first things first, we have to make sure, well, you can do both at the same time, but you definitely have to be ready to react, be in a good position um, for when these attacks become possible. And it's changed a lot. I think there's a perception that it's always, nothing's changed in the last 20 years, but that's definitely false. Even in the last 6 months, certainly in the last 20 years, it went from a hypothesis needing a lot of testing to it's been validated. We know how to build scalable fault-tolerant quantum computers just in the last few months, right? This is all changing rapidly. We have several large vendors saying they're going to have, cryptographically relevant quantum computers or, the early very close to them. So in technically hundreds of these logical error corrected quantum bits. And some are even claiming they'll be enough to break the existing codes before 2030, as early as 28, 29. Now, they might be wrong. There might be some delays, and that would still be impressive if they're a couple years late. But these are serious companies with track records making these claims, and they've never made these claims before, right? Never. So no serious entity has had these specific items on their roadmaps. They've always been a little more vague and cautious, but now they're at the point where they're confident enough to state this as part of their roadmap. So, there's the so-called threat side that is definitely heated up, but that's maybe not even probably the biggest game changer is because there's getting quantum ready because you're worried about the actual all the implications of quantum enabled attacks. But at some point, it doesn't matter what your opinion is on whether it's going to be 29 or 31 or whatever. You have to be ready now. You have to get ahead of, you have to be ready to answer your regulators, your board, your customers, because they're all asking now. So it's even with the cyber, in addition to the actual real cyber enabled, quantum enabled threats. And it's not just about confidentiality, it's about the availability and so on of your systems. Now regulators are getting involved, and for some sectors, giving strict timelines for quantum readiness. And again, your boards and customers are going to be asking. So you really have to be in a position to address this. And it requires active engagement immediately. Your vendors aren't going to magically take care of this without any engagement from you. And it's not a tomorrow problem anymore. So it really is urgent to ramp up your quantum readiness efforts.
Yes, exactly. So when we talk about, quantum computer, CRQC actually coming into play, one thing is when it's going to actually be physically available, but another thing, again, as you mentioned, regulators, right? NIST IR 8547 is disallowing and deprecating a lot of public key crypto systems by 2035, right? So we do have certain firm deadlines, regardless of CRQC happening or not by that time. Well, I guess it would be devastating if it happens before that time for a lot of organizations, but
Yeah.
we'll have to see as the time goes on. And among the responses, we kind of said that nearly half of organizations acknowledge they're not prepared. And from my experience, uh, this number is probably going to be even higher realistically because sometimes there's a false sense of
Yeah.
security that we're seeing. But in the real life, like organizations that have dedicated budget for PQC readiness is even a lower number. It's 28%. And with government and industry timelines accelerating, what are the real world implications for organizations that are still in very early stages?
Yeah. I kind of already alluded to, you want to be on side with your regulators and your customers and so on, because otherwise it'll be a very serious business problem if you're not able to deliver the kind of assurance they need. Because then you might lose business, you might lose the ability to operate, or you're going to have a very expensive, rushed migration, expensive, instead of elegant, just gracefully evolving to a quantum ready state, you're going to have to do a very crisis management kind of rip and replace to be compliant because it takes years to do this. So, and the signals are all there that in some cases in law that you have for certain sectors that you have to be compliant. Again, I've already kind of alluded to, I think we know the cyber threats. It's not just confidentiality, it's the integrity, it's the control of connected devices, it's the ability to maintain, you want to maintain the trust and confidence of your key stakeholders. And that's really the biggest risk right now if you don't have a well articulated plan. And I've already started the initial steps now. There are really major organizations that still don't know who's in charge of this. And that's a real risk. I mean, there's a technology side. I have high confidence in the technology people able to address the risks, but you really need the initial strategic assessment of the whole organization. How ready are we to navigate this? This really should not be a problem. This is not something we should be talking about. The system should be taking care of this naturally as part of our cyber immune system, but it isn't. So we really need to quickly understand, how does the risk governance? What about legal? Where does procurement fit in? How do they fit in all this? And if they really rapidly have a whole of enterprise plan here, so you can get ahead of this. And most importantly, because we're not going to get the 30-year, 40-year heads up next time. We want to know that when we get to the other side of this migration, we've not just dealt with this one issue. We now have a stronger cyber immune system. So the next time, we have to be ready for an algorithmic break with no advance warning. Like that should just, like, why isn't that already the case? Because the whole point of a code is, I propose the math, the computationally secure stuff. You're basically daring adversaries to break it. So that's the whole game. They're trying to break it. So them breaking it shouldn't be a big surprise because that's exactly what they're supposed to be doing. We hope they don't. We hope they don't do it right away. We hope we know about it in advance. But those hopes are not a strategy. We just need to be ready for that. And again, not expect advance. Look, when adversaries in the history of cryptography, when they break your codes, usually they try to exploit it as much as possible without you noticing. And the moment they know you're going to know, then there's a mad rush to cash in as much as they possibly can before you take that capability away. So this is not new. We just need to have our cyber immune system ready to deal with that possibility.
Exactly, exactly. As we've seen even in history, like even looking at the good side of how it's been treated, right? For example, the Enigma break, right? That was broken, but British was very careful not to disclose that they're actually getting the information that Germans are encrypting, so that way they can continue, to be able to decrypt the information. So even things like that have happened in history, such big use cases. And when we talk about the first steps, usually we say, okay, you need to have cryptographic visibility, and 92% of organizations have the claim that they do have cryptographic visibility. Now, I guess the question is, what does it mean for an organization to have cryptographic visibility? One thing is I know what TLS versions I'm using. That's one type of cryptographic visibility, a very limited one. But there's other parts of, what kind of cryptography do you have in your end host? What cryptography is kind of in there down in your ecosystem that you might not even have visibility of, right? That becomes a big question, and it's hard to answer for a lot of organizations. And there's way less, active monitoring of cryptography within the organizations. So when we talk about, a true quantum safe roadmap, what should it look like from inventory to algorithm selection, integration, embedding that to be part of your whole ecosystem that would be manageable? And as you already mentioned, right there, it should be not only focusing on post quantum, but how can we remediate that quickly? So can we maybe have a few of your thoughts in terms of
Yeah.
how do you think that should be implemented to be able to take care of it actively?
So I think firstly, we have to make sure it's understood that it's not just a technology problem, because that slows us down because we know the answer. We need agility, we need PQC, we need defense in depth, but the business people are like, do I really? Like, I just need business continuity. I need, to have the confidence of my customers and so on. And of course, we're like, yeah, but you need these things to maintain those things. So we have to often make it clear, like what we're trying. We have to start with the real objective, which is maintaining the trust of our stakeholders, maintaining the continuity of our business assets, right? Maintaining interoperability and so on, right? So we can achieve our business objectives, make money, but provide the value we're here to provide. So we have to make sure that's part of it. And I think, cryptographic visibility is part of the technical part, which is absolutely necessary. And you have been obviously one of the pioneers amongst others, like modernizing how we do that, because we were still kind of doing it with the 1990s playbooks of how we sort of track our cryptography. But the cryptographic footprint is just astronomical now compared to the old days, and growing. The stakes are getting higher, so we really have to modernize how we track and manage our cryptography. Absolutely. But I think the step zero before that is really that strategic assessment as an enterprise to understand how ready are we really to respond to this cryptographic, whether it's advanced notice, need for cryptographic migration, or no notice cryptographic migration. Honestly assess, like, what are the gaps in our risk governance, right? Are all the stakeholders and legal? So quickly step back and see where our strengths and weaknesses are, right? Because those need to be addressed now and going forward. So we really do, and this is a few weeks exercise, right? So this initial strategic assessment is really an important level setting, deciding, well, wait a minute, where are we going, right? Before we jump into all the details of my inventory and hybrid and all this other stuff, where are we trying to go again? And make sure the ship is pointing in the right direction. And then indeed, you have to have visibility on your cryptographic footprint to both, because you can, of course, from a top-down perspective, know, well, my payment system depends on this protocol which uses cryptography. I need to migrate this right away. You don't need a full-fledged inventory for some of these, but you really do need one if you want this to be not just whack-a-mole, but really evolve to a strong cyber immune system. So you have to, that's an important part of it. When we help organizations define their quantum roadmaps, obviously, cryptographic asset management, inventory, and so on is one of the critical work streams, but there's a governance work stream, a risk management work stream, procurement, and so on. So we boiled it down to 8 work streams that take you through, again, the setting the direction, starting the inventory, doing deciding how much security do I need for each of these systems, because it's not secure or not, right? There's many different. You can have strong, you can have bigger keys. You can have level 5 security. You can have one layer of defense, 2 or 3, really depending on the criticality of the asset. So these are decisions you have to make, and then you have to migrate, maintain, validate, and so on. Uh, and it's kind of the end. It's more of a steady state we want to get to, or then we can continue to adapt as requirements change.
Yes, absolutely agree that, it's great to actually, as you mentioned, to figure out the whole overall strategy, where to steer towards, what do we want to achieve, right? And have that built. And, from my personal experience, we've had, time when an organization would come to us, being our client, would say, you know what, we have the PQC transition team that we formed. We have absolutely no idea what to do. Can you help us? And although they're at level 0, this is way better level than doing absolutely nothing about it, because they're actually asking questions. They're saying, help us, formulate the strategy, help us understand what this is all about. So I think that's already showing, good proactiveness. I mean, hopefully by now organizations are past that phase, which is usually not the case, but that already shows that they are doing something.
Yeah.
Another thing that we're seeing, of course, is there's a big gap in terms of talent, right, or skilled personnel in the area. So the data shows that the resource gap is roughly 40%. That would have the capability to actually help migrate this whole cryptographic changes. Let's say again, I don't want to
Yeah.
just focus only on PQC only, because we realize that we're going to be living through various cryptographic changes over the time. Even within the PQC migration itself, there's going to be multiple stages, right? It's the biggest cryptographic change we're yet to live through, and most likely they will become more often in the future. So how do you see the cryptographic resilience fitting into broader story of quantum readiness, and is this really more than a one-time migration from your perspective?
Yeah. So, well, in terms of workforce, at the University of Waterloo, like, in addition to, cutting edge academic courses, the experiential learning part to the co-op program and so on is really critical. So I think you got to do, like, this is where you're not going to just pour the knowledge into your brain. You really have to start doing some of the work. Uh, yeah, this really has to be part of creating. We have to be much more ready the next time. I call this quantum threat really a blessing in disguise, because we're very, very cryptographically fragile and vulnerable. There's this immense concentration, like, maybe one way to look at it as a concentration risk, right? Which is something people are more and more aware of now. And supply chain risk, like, these are board level, regulator level, state level issues, but they're all using the same small set of cryptographic tools and libraries, sometimes literally the same libraries. And so the concentration is immense. So we really have to evolve to a much more less fragile, more resilient posture. And we have to be ready. I'm not saying zero risk by all means, but it's certainly not just a logical possibility. It's like, it has happened that codes have been broken. We've been lucky in the past, in that either the immediately broken codes, you know, were broken, but were not widely deployed, or the widely deployed codes, when they were broken, we had advance warning. But luck is not a strategy. We have to be ready. You have to be able to say, from a risk perspective, if this code is broken, because I think there's probably on the order of a 10% chance that the ML Chem, for example, could be broken in the next decade. That order of magnitude, right? So probably not, but that's not a risk you can ignore. We have to say we know what it means, and that's where you need the inventory and the asset management and risk management. So we know what the impact is. We've sufficiently bounded it so it's recoverable, and we're agile enough so we can recover. Right. So cryptograph and the long-term, like the real critical information assets with the long shelf life, they've been protected with long-term secure cryptography. So you have those extra layers of assurance, like symmetric cryptography, So it's much more likely to be protected in the long term. So those are kind of the elements of cryptographic resilience. Detecting, being agile enough to switch when you need to, having the defense in depth so a break doesn't take down your critical systems. You have time to fix, upgrade the broken, so then you can use the agility. Because if everything crashes, then agility's not is too late in a sense, and where needed the long-term asset. So the end game is indeed cryptographic resilience, so it can give you that confidence, maintaining the trust, assurance of business continuity, and readiness for all the unexpected things of the future. Because in addition to quantum, we have AI and so on. Very exciting things. Let's reap all the positive rewards, and let's not be afraid of their code breaking capabilities. Let's just be ready for their code breaking capabilities and say, yep, we were ready for that. Obviously, it's not going to be a good day if that happens, but it's a recoverable day. We have a plan, and we're going to get to the other side of this quickly.
Absolutely agree with this because, I always say that this whole quantum threat has really uncovered a lot of things that are a long time overdue in our, digital trust and our overall cryptographic management component for a lot of organizations. So if we approach this correct today, then most likely this will give us, a much better and a much easier future with all the, risks that could be coming in the landscape. Um, One last thing I wanted to quickly maybe get your perspective on is that for a lot of organizations, the teams that are leading the PQC transition are usually not part of the C-suite or part of the
Mhm.
board. What guidance and frameworks or partnerships should security leaders lean on to move faster and get quantum safe before the window closes? Because we realize, right, when there's a gap between the technical team and the board, it might take extra time. Maybe the expenses are not there by the organization, etc. So how can we speed these things up?
Yeah. um, so at the technical layer, because often we oversimplify things, and for a large, complex, interconnected thing like our public key infrastructures, there's a lot of moving parts. You're so interdependent. Let's go as fast as we can, of course. I think part of what helps is setting timelines, because everyone's still talking about their feelings about when they think they need to be quantum safe. Like, that's not going to happen. So things like the national governments are doing, saying, well, our systems are going to be, the critical systems by 2030 and the others by 2035. That helps a lot. The financial sector is starting to articulate timelines as well. We need other sectors to articulate the goal, and now we can coalesce and try to meet that goal. If you're saying, yeah, but if you're worried about cyber risk, or you're worried about, like, I'm not sure that's not fast enough for me, then there are faster ways to deploy standards-based cryptography through more symmetric key infrastructure. So now I'm getting into the technical weeds. The point I want to make is decide what you want from a risk mitigation perspective. We have the technical solutions that are standards based. So symmetric key infrastructures are a faster way that you can't necessarily protect as many things, but they are, for many of our systems, a faster way to deploy things. And there's methods like TLS 1.3, the new way, to protect HTTPS, for example, allows you to add additional security in while you're waiting for the main line of defense to mature. So there's lots of ways to go faster. If your risk, like if your risk, assessment, if your own risk, appetite says you need to go faster. The technology side, there are a few shortcuts for some prioritized use cases that you could take, and there are safe ways to deploy things that aren't yet completely standardized and certified yet. And it's not complicated. You keep doing the certified stuff, right? And then there's ways to inject additional layers as they're maturing. Again, you might, in some cases, maybe you just wait for the overall ecosystem to evolve, but set the timelines, right? You got to communicate this with your ecosystem. But if there really are use cases where you have to go faster, there's no excuse. There are ways to protect specific systems immediately if you need it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mosca. So the clear takeaways of today that quantum isn't a future threat, it's a now problem, or sometimes say it's almost like a yesterday's problem. If you haven't started yesterday, you're already running late. The timelines are accelerating. The skill and resource gaps are real, and waiting for someone else to move first could leave your organization dangerously exposed. If you want to dive deeper into the survey data we've discussed today, check out Digital Trust Digest, the Quantum Readiness Edition, where we review insights from 450 cybersecurity professionals and share strategies for building a quantum safe roadmap. Michele, thank you for joining us. Always a pleasure to get your perspective on where we are and where we need to go with this enormous and huge, exciting, complicated transition where we've started living through.
Well, it's been a great pleasure. I mean, for more information, of course, the chief cryptologic authorities, the governments have great guidance. There's organizations like FSISAC and the Canadian Forum for Digital Infrastructure Resilience offer guidance, and you can also follow us at evolutionQ on LinkedIn for ongoing, information and updates. Anyway, it's really been a pleasure. Really excited that of all the great work you've done since that Ph.D. defense many years ago. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. My pleasure.